Chapter 6. Gronal Beidemer, by the lake. The battle in the Kemar system had let up for the time being. The Kemar portal was under the Imperial Star Force's complete control. That was not to say they had driven out the enemy from all corners of the system. The enemy was lurking in certain sectors, awaiting their chance to counterattack. The theater that was thought to possess a special war potential was Akkad. Akkad was a giant gas planet with a number of satellites, which were what made Kemar a munition-centric star system boasting a concentration of factories and resource mining operations. The star forces had laid hold of the inner planets. After securing a star, it was customary to set up mobile antimatter fuel factories. They also assembled repair ships, Raboniak, food supply ships, and Garimiak, medic ships, in orbit above each of the planets they secured. The ships of Trampleblitz Squadron 1 had moored alongside the repair ships to undergo servicing. While there was a pause in hostilities, it wasn't yet safe enough to be setting up mobile base canteens. But there were over 10 supply ships to serve as replacements, revolving around the second planet of the Kemar system, Menderis. Instead of goods and commodities, the supply ships, all C-tier class, were packed with restaurants, bars, fitness facilities, game halls, theaters, aquariums, museums, zoos, and other recreational facilities that could be established within cramped vessels. These supply ships were small models meant to accompany recon subfleets, so they were highly maneuverable and had the same level of armaments as defense ships. In the event of an enemy attack, they could break away from the battlefield with the soldiers, sluggish after a few days off, still aboard. One of those ships, the Bacheter, had a peculiar interior design. It had been made of park. The 5-story Zokerdur, garden deck, within the ship was 10 U-stag long and 2 U-stag wide. 3 of the decks were further demarcated, but 2 weren't. Trampleblitz Squadron 1 had reserved Zokerdurgana, garden deck 4, also known as the Wapeus Gronal Beidemer, lakeside space, for the day. First, said the Commandant, Kilo Commander Ados Raiwa, a moment of silence for the soldiers, both enemy and allied, that fell in battle. Over 200 soldiers lowered their heads, a solemn pall of silence enveloping the place. Ados Raiwa was standing atop a slightly raised tier relative to the rest. It was more of a tiny mound than anything else, and that mound was covered by tykrub, carpet grass, grass genetically engineered to be short and not to wither when tread upon. It also allowed for small flowers to bloom. The flowers would get crushed underfoot, but the grass was such that new flowers would bloom in a few dozen minutes' time. The soldiers were also standing on that carpet of grass. Garden Deck 4 was divided into the carpet grass section and the pond. The lawn was dotted sparsely with trees. The ceiling and walls projected imagery that gave them the illusion of standing on a vast lake shore under an endless blue sky. There were animals, too, and they were no illusions. The shrill and noisy birds stood out in particular. Apparently, they were incapable of reading the room. One of these birds was chirping especially irksomely, dashing the mood. "The moment of silence is now over," she said, a little indignantly. But her next command was stated with majesty and dignity. "All hands, prepare for the toast." Between the pond and where the soldiers were standing lay dozens of flawless tables, each with cups and 88 different types of beverage on offer. The soldiers briskly scattered to grab their cups and pour their preferred drinks. Next to Ados Raiwa stood the top brass of the squadron, and they had their own tables prepared for them. Jin took a glass and poured himself some rose-colored Rordasek wine. A hand from beside him. It was Lafier. "What do you want to drink?" he asked, noticing the cup in her hand. "I'd like it if you could cut Kadasek, mead, with Relter, apple brandy, for me." "Shouldn't you at least be cutting apple brandy with mead?" "I see your taste is lacking," she replied, looking at him wonderingly. "That would be far too sweet." "You're right. Forget I said anything." All Ovs, without exception, could handle their liquor and then some. The alcohol in their bloodstreams was systematically broken down. Jin's body could hardly keep up. The Ovs around him were drinking quantities the sight of which made him queasy. Yet they never got drunk. Samson would call it a curse, and Jint had to wonder what the point of drinking the stuff even was for the Ov. Though the anti-Ov crowd claimed Ovs were just mimicking real human beings, Jint figured that if that were the case, they'd need to feign drunkenness. Jint took her cup and made to pour her some mead. That's not how you do it, she stopped him. You need to dip in the stirring rod. Say what now? Then you use it to stir the brandy. Everyone knows that. For real. Jin thought he'd adapted to of society, but he clearly still had a ways to go. But then, there's no reason to stir it, is there? Unless that's what cutting is. It's in the flavor. He made the drink she ordered and handed it over. Similar kerfuffles were occurring here and there, and the preparations for the toast took longer than he expected. It appeared there were more than a few who liked their drinks a certain way. Ados Raiwa had her apple cider-filled cup in hand soon enough, but she waited patiently for her subordinates to finish choosing. Preparations for the toast are complete, Commandant, said Sabash, who was holding something green. Lend me your ears, my valiant soldiers, she began. Well, not that being valiant matters much today, but just take the compliment. Trampleblitz Squadron may first be a valiant band of soldiers, but it doesn't have any traditions to match, so we have the duty and right to create some. Today, a new page will be added to that ledger of traditions. Jint was listening to her speech while standing nearby. We have a lot of new officers, so allow me to throw light on tradition number 1. At the banquets of Trampleblitz Squadron 1, there is to be no saluting. That does not mean you may fail to pay your superiors, colleagues, and subordinates due respect. And I shall invite any who are rude to me to my domain. I'll prepare you a room between the cultivation ranch and the hydroponics. What sort of rude behavior should we do in order to receive such a wonderful punishment? Asked somebody from among the soldiers. That you'll have to come up with on your own. But let me inform you that that room was created as a prison cell. It's a place of solitude, though I suppose that some of you may enjoy that. There were some groans, but they were somewhat amused groans. The next tradition, you may not play with your food. Occasionally, there are those who seem intent on treating the food without respect. It seems as though in some cultural spheres, smearing badhor cream wheats all over someone is an act of significance. It may be some sort of religious notion, but in any case, I don't understand the impulse. Of course, I'm not so uncultured as to immediately repudiate any cultural touchstone I can't seem to grasp, but I, Laik, the Baroness of Febdash, and the first ever commanding officer of this squadron, hereby forbid it forevermore. If your religion requires you to throw food at someone, do it out of sight. Got it? No one protested. Now then, the new tradition we will be introducing is very simple. Whenever there's a grandee in the squadron, that grandee will treat everyone when given the opportunity. We'll have them carry out their noble duties. And may this beautiful tradition stand firm for all time. Shouts of joy and cheering erupted. At present, there was only one grandee in Trampleblitz Squadron 1, and that was the Count of Hyde. If she'd said nobles instead of grandees, more people would have qualified. For example, Ados Raiwa herself was the Baroness of Febdash. But she was a lady, not a grandee. Grandees were nobles who headed star systems with inhabited planets. Incidentally, Jint had not been consulted in the creation of this new tradition. In fact, Ados Raiwa had not consulted a single other soul. Talk about unreasonable, he thought. The money wasn't the issue. The revenue he earned from the Hyde Countdom was enormous. Most of it was reinvested back into Hyde, but Jint's share was still too vast for him to ever spend it all. He could hold a banquet of this scale every week if he so desired. But money wasn't all that was being asked of him. If he was going to pay for it, why did he need to be the one behind the arrangements, too? He was a clerk, and clerks, along with inspector supervisors, were busier when not voyaging. In fact, reserving the garden deck and holding a banquet was Jint's idea. In truth, garden decks were unpopular among people from land worlds. Land worlds were very diverse, after all, and the simulated environment inside a supply ship didn't do much to remind landers of their homes. Only a planet of considerable surface area could hope to do that. Moreover, some landers insisted with fists shaken in anger that artificial environments were a sacrilege against nature. As far as Jint was concerned, however, it scarcely mattered whether the scenery was a pale imitation. It was just nice to see Ovs and landers conversing amidst the hallmarks of nature every once in a while. After that thought occurred to him, making the arrangements for the feast wasn't that onerous. but the aspect of unreasonableness remained. "Now to introduce tonight's organizer," said Ados Ryua. "Everybody, give him a big round of applause." Reluctantly, Jint stepped atop the mound as the applause continued. He had to give some remarks, too. And as much as he didn't want to, he also had to pretend he'd been more than happy to put on the party. "Guess that's just another duty of nobility," he rationalized. "I'll keep this short, so please, bear with me," he started, in order to win their sympathy. "I've put together this banquet as a token of appreciation for everything you do. Your being here is the fruit of your hard work and your good fortune. I just ask that you take pride in that. Forgive me if I'm bragging, but happily, the Countdom of Hyde is doing well economically. As such, I'd like to have the honor of recognizing your services again sometime soon." More cheers and applause. Jint raised his cup. "In addition, I'd like to welcome you and the new soldiers. I couldn't secure any in time for today's feast, but I want to bring special Hyde spirits for everyone to try next time. Only, I'll be ceding the privilege of giving remarks to someone else. Now let's have a toast." "Thank you, Lonnie Dryor," replied the soldiers in unison. The clinking of cups sounded all throughout the venue. "Now to introduce today's master of ceremonies. Come, Liwing Nambak." Yes. Judging by the look on Nambaka's face as he approached, he was steeled for this. A round of applause urged Jint. The soldiers dutifully clapped. Jint felt self-conscious, but also a little depressed. He had a feeling he was getting a glimpse into the charms of being a commanding officer. But Jint was a quartermaster star pilot, an administrative official of the military. He would never hold a command position. And he couldn't transfer to the flight branch if he wanted to, not without a frosh on his forehead. Jint ceded the mound to Nambak, only to find Lafier shooting him a critical look. "Did I say something off?" he asked, apprehensively. "No. But I must say, you're a terrible person." "Why?" Jint could only cock his head at this unexpected line of attack. Foisting command on a kid like that? Being master of ceremonies isn't command, and he's not a kid either. Given that he's a star pilot, he's of higher rank than the majority of the people here. Besides... What? You've aged, Lafier. You know, now that you're treating people like kids. You blockhead. In reality, Nambak and Lafier were only 5 years apart in age. The Empire was not so hard-pressed as to be dragging actual children to the battlefield. Your speech was humdrum, too. It was like you were playing salesman. That's just another grandee obligation. Or at least, that's what Mr. Sampson told me. Being a grandee must be difficult. Why are you making it seem like it has nothing to do with you? You'll be one too, one day. If I do become a grandee, it will only be far down the line. Guess that's true. Lafier's star fief, the Viscountdom of Parian, had no inhabited planets. In order to become a grandee, she would have to terraform a planet so that it could support a population, and that process took quite some time. Plus, she'd only have the wherewithal to terraform once she was retired, once she'd seen through her obligations as an imperial. If she ever acceded to the Jade Throne, then that period of freedom would be delayed even longer. And that was assuming the war would be over by then. It was a project of the far, far future. Atop the bulge of land, Nambak seemed flustered. We will be carrying in the food. All hands, please be careful." Some food tables approached, crossing the water's surface, while others descended from the ceiling. "Please make way. That NCC over there, move to the side. And that NCC over there, please refrain from reaching for the food until all the tables have stopped moving. Inadi, ugh. What are you doing, Deca Commander Ekriwa?" From where he was standing, Jint couldn't tell what Ekriwa was trying to do. The soldiers, for their part, were busy criticizing the food. "Okay, understood," said Nambak. "How about we do it like this? Don't move from your current position, if you please. Remain where you are until I give the signal." "You've botched the arrangements, I think," said Lafier, staring as the tables came gracefully down. "I don't think this staging was necessary." "It's my first time," said Jint. "I'll do it right next time." "I thought it was a pretty good idea at the time, though. Next time, you'd do well to give your remarks more thought as well." "I see," said Jint dejectedly. "How would you do the speech?" Lafier tilted her head in thought. "I don't know. I would have to be put in that position to tell you." Also, I'm not saying I think I could give more entertaining remarks than you. Gotcha. Why don't we put you to the test during the next banquet? I'll be the guy pulling the strings in the back. No thank you, she replied instantly. Isn't it vital for an Imperial to give speeches? Actually, forget as an Imperial, as a commanding officer. I can give a speech when taking us into battle. But what do I tell a group that's here to drink? Besides, I couldn't subject the soldiers to what would amount to a practice session for me. All right, then quit complaining. I wasn't complaining. I was just giving you my opinion. Lafier raised an eyebrow. Did you want to be complimented? No, that's not. Very well then. Nambaka's efforts were rewarded when the tables settled into their designated positions. By all means, you may now dine. The rugs and seats have been prepared. You may of course use them at your leisure. Please enjoy the food and the opportunities for pleasant chatting, he said, audibly relieved, before descending from the mound. Thank you very much, Liwing Nambak. Jint raised a cup to him. I thank you, said Nambak, exhaustion written on his face. I was nervous. I'll be relying on you from here on out, too. Yes, sir. What drink are you taking? Tyrek Mlemmer, grape juice, please. I still need to act as master of ceremonies. Don't get so tense up there. You should enjoy it, the same as everybody else, smiled Jint. Jint made to take his cup, but someone handed Nambak a cup a moment sooner. It was Ekriua. Surprised, Nambak took it, and Ekriua poured him something without a word. Jint couldn't tell what it was, but it definitely wasn't grape juice. Thank you very much, Deca Commander, said Nambak dazedly. Ekriua glanced at him, then left their side. Was this how she apologized? That reminds me, what was Deca Commander Ekriua? But Ados Raiwa's arrival cut his question short. Good work. Out of reflex, Jint was dangerously close to saluting. Not saluting felt awkward, strangely. It was like his hand didn't know what to do. Thankfully, that hand was holding a cup. He lightly raised it in her general direction. Safe. This was quite the idea, Lanyu Dryor, she praised. Thank you very much. I don't know when we'll be returning to the capital, said Ados Raiwa, but when we do, it'll be my turn to treat you to a feast. I look forward to it. As well you should. If you ever feel like writing a transfer request, wait until after that banquet. Ma'am, I'd never make such a request. I must say, said Ados Raiwa, scanning the soldiers all around, we took more losses than I imagined. I wanted a few more people here to celebrate with us. Though I want to spend my money in Lokvakar. It's just as we predicted beforehand, said Sabash, who'd come to chat. Is that right? Just personally, I was expecting the fight to be a bit easier. She sipped her apple cider. And to think, the real fight is yet to come. Is that so? Asked Lafier, her interest piqued. Her cup was already empty. Want another of the same? Asked Jint, taking it off her hands. Yep, said Lafier. Jint wet the stirring rod in the mead. While Jint made her concoction of choice, Ados Raiwa was discussing an operation that Fleet Command was considering. Is this not confidential, ma'am? Asked Sabash uneasy. I'm just speculating they might go ahead with this sort of operation. It's not as though I was eavesdropping. I'd like to ask you the basis behind that speculation, if possible, said Sabash, his tone suspicious. I'm sorry, Senior Staff Officer, said Ados Raiwa. That is classified. I have to wonder whether such an operation would be effective. It certainly would, she said. The enemy is holed up in the outer planets of the system, or more specifically, in satellites that were turned into strongholds. Even if I were Commander-in-Chief, I'd hit them with raid ships. In this instance, there's no more effective method than opening fire on them from warships flying at sublight speed. I see, said Sabash. But surely, a single squadron wouldn't be enough. Of course not. I couldn't stand it if the mission were pushed on just us. But we'll be the leading squadron. What an honor, he smiled wryly. That sounds like just the operation to test the limits of a raid ship's acceleration, butted in the ship commander of the Marskob. Before she knew it, the ship commanders were gathered around Ados Raiwa. They must have already tested that, thought Jint. Must be a joke. Here you go, said Jint, handing Lafier her drink. Lafier promptly took a sip and gave him a nod. It's good. Good, he beamed. My, though, what a pain this star system is, sighed Ados Raiwa. Who knows how many weapons will be coming at us. But men and women in uniform aren't so endless, said the ship commander of the Tukoff. Quite so, nodded Ados Raiwa. There's no end to enemy ships. Which means we need to make our primary objective taking human lives. That's war. It can't be helped, said Sabash quietly. Man has yet to develop the technology to wage war without risking human lives. True, said Ados Raiwa. But there's a psychological difference between people dying as a result of sinking ships and sinking ships in order to kill the people on them. That's a unique way of looking at it, opined the ship commander of the Nakab. You don't agree? No, ma'am. It's not as though the way we fight will ever change, is it? I suppose not, she granted. That said, something just isn't sitting right with me. Jin understood how she felt. It seemed the Off had a tendency to regard the crew as components of a ship, at least during wartime. Jin hadn't grown that accustomed to Off's sensibilities. Seeing as Ados Raiwa's father was a lander, it stood to reason she harbored some lander sensibilities, albeit not to Jin's extent. It just doesn't make sense, said Ados Raiwa indignantly. It doesn't, replied the Nakaba ship commander half-heartedly. Kemar is the PSSU's largest munitions star system, she explained. More accurately, it's its only munitions system. The nation's productivity is centered almost entirely in Kemar. So why would such a system be on the border with a hostile nation? That's the reason we have to go through such a hard time. Did they not realize that signing the Four Nations Alliance Accord made the Empire their enemy? I think that's a history problem, said the ship commander. That system was their munitions system since before the signing of the Accord. Granted, they did neglect to transfer it away after the Accord came into effect. I understand that, said Ados Raiwa, interrupting his long-winded monologue. On the other hand, said Sabash, we have that lack of sense to thank for the end of the war being in sight, don't we? What do you mean? The end of the war. Ados Raiwa inclined her head. This system has lost any means of communication with the outside, so the PSSU has lost any ability to continue to prosecute the war, Sabash opined. From here on out, they must do battle using their stockpiled reserves, and they can't possibly rely on the aid of their allied nations. Not when they're stuck between the neutral Hania Federation and we of the Empire. Are you saying the PSSU will drop out? I agree with the Chief of Staff, said the ship commander of the Tukoff. I don't think they'll be able to avoid that eventuality. In that case, I can't really complain, said Ados Raiwa, though her tone did seem a little let down, in a way. I feel it's rather a shame, said the ship commander of the Marskob. Not enough battles for your taste? Asked Ados Raiwa. Correct, ma'am. It's okay, said the Nakab commander. I'm sure the UH will pick up the slack. I wonder, said the Marskob commander skeptically. In truth, the UH is fairly scattered as well. If you ask me, our hope for a good fight lies in the greater Alkant Republic, said the Tukoff commander. Both the United Humankind and the People's Sovereign Stellar Union were commonwealths, with the lack of a sense of unity that entailed. Then again, compared to the Empire, they were the height of homogeneous. For one, the way each of their constituent systems were tied by a lingua franca was unthinkable in the Empire. While Barani was taught as a second language on most Empire planets, that was not due to some kind of official imperial policy. However, the Greater Alkant Republic was a different story in terms of unity. Especially since the nation became an interstellar power, they fixated on the principles of land worlds. Their intersystem exchange was the most enthusiastic, and a robust and powerful bureaucracy bound those systems together, which made them all the more formidable an adversary. What do you think, Chief of Staff? Asked Ados Raiwa. I've always thought of myself as a merchant, replied Sabash. I just want to return to my principal vocation as quickly as possible. I've always thought of myself as a libertine, said Ados Raiwa, breathing a sigh. I want to return to that vocation as quickly as possible, too. What do you plan to do with your domain, ma'am? Asked the Tukoff commander. Once the war ends, there'll be more than enough good magistrates to employ, said the Baroness of Feb- impetuously. Besides, my father is still alive. Goodness, ma'am. What do you think, Vice Hecto Commander Avriel? Ados Raiwa asked the taciturn ship commander of the Flickob. I have never given my principal vocation any thought, Commandant, she replied. Well, I guess being a star pilot is just a stepping stone in the learning process for you. Leifir wordlessly sipped her mead cut with apple brandy, or at least, the drink she asserted to be such. Jin thought she might be asking herself what exactly she wanted to do. "Oh no, I can't believe myself," said Ados Ryua, glancing at Jint. "This isn't the place to be discussing military strategy. Come on, everyone, let's break this up. Why don't you use this opportunity to deepen your friendships with your subordinates, ship commanders of mine? It might be a good idea to talk to the soldiers of ships besides your own as well." The ship commanders let out strained laughs before dispersing. "Hey, Liwing Nombok," said Jint, patting the messenger of the flick-up on the shoulder. "This is your department. I'm counting on you." "Yes, Vanguard, sir." Jint then left that spot as well. The singing of Already Drunk Soldiers filled the air. 2 different songs from 2 different singers were clashing. It was torture on the ears, but it was preferable to a fistfight. Was this feast a success? "I wonder," ventured Jint. The reason he reserved this spacious park was so that a little cutting loose would be tolerable. That would not have been the case in a normal commercial establishment. "Lonnie Dryor," called a voice. There stood an unfamiliar NCC, likely a crew member of another ship. Each raid ship housed just under 30 crew members, and not even Jint knew all of their names and faces. At the end of the day, Jint's job involved looking after their meals and their health. And no one on the flick-op would call him Lonnie Dryor. They'd call him Clerk or Vanguard, Star Pilot. "What's up?" said Jint. "Might we have a Delbin songifier on hand? Would using your wrist gear as one not cut it?" At times, Jint had a tendency to think of wrist gears as truly all-purpose. After all, it came with some all but pointless features as well. Whether or not the ability to play music was one of those pointless features was in the eye of the beholder, of course. In any case, if someone wanted the musical accompaniment a songifier provided, they had only to leave it to their wrist gear. They could choose from among hundreds of millions of tracks and tunes. "It wouldn't be the same," replied the NCC instantly. "Probably won't be happy just singing at high volume. This NCC wants to make the whole park rumble with an electronically amplified voice." "All right," said Jint. "I'll arrange for one right away." Just then, another NCC came panting. "Please get us one too." "Us." The 2 NCCs began making their respective cases. From what Jin understood, one of them was a member of the Koelkov and the other of the Nakab. And it was these 2 who'd been competing with each other for the ears of the park earlier. Each wanted him to furnish a songifier for their own group of shipmates. "That is true equality," said the Nakaba's representative. "If the enemy is unarmed, we fight them unarmed. But once they've armed themselves, we can't just sit down and take it. If we don't match them weapon for weapon, they'll just bowl us over." "You're just being thin-skinned," said the Koelkov. "We're not fighting you. We just want to enjoy the magic of song." "Go ahead and enjoy it then. We just want to enjoy our singing too." "Oh, we will." While the 2 argued, NCCs from yet another ship came along. They must have found this amusing, for they too began demanding a songifier of their own. "Maybe I should get 5 or so songifiers," thought Jint. But he soon cast aside that notion. The deck was wide, but it wasn't wide enough for multiple songifiers to coexist. If they sang different songs at the same time without voice amplification, it would be bearable. With voice amplification, even a fistfight would be preferable, and not by a little. At least with a fistfight, they could ignore it. He contemplated setting up a soundproof room, but then what was the point of throwing the squadron a party to begin with? "Listen, I'm giving everyone a single songifier," said Jint firmly. "Nombok of the Flickob will decide the singing order." "You mean the Master of Ceremonies, Kid, or Star Pilot?" Jint nodded and got them their songifier, inwardly apologizing to Nombok. The songifier, a podium that provided accompaniment and amplified the singer's voice, came gliding over the water's surface. For a handful of seconds, he wondered where to place the thing, before deciding to situate it in the farthest recess by the pond. That way, he could minimize the damage. The first NCC mounted the songifier and started singing a song from a far-off land world, voice drenched with emotion. The second the song began, Ados Ryua came rushing over. "What is this mess?" she scolded him. "They asked, I supplied," he said defensively. "I thought I'd help them have their fun." "Which is great, but what about everyone else?" Ados Ryua stared at Jin's face, but soon she broke into a smile. Fine. This is your feast. To be honest with you, I'm not sure what the NCCs enjoy. This might be a good thing. That's very kind of you, ma'am. That being said, it seems not all of the NCCs are enjoying themselves. Sure enough, there was a group of people distancing themselves from the songifier. That's why I put the songifier at the very edge, he said boastfully, taking pride in his forward thinking. And that was a good idea, said a cringing Ados Ryua. Just ban the thing next time. Please. Yes, ma'am, he said, dejected.